So let's see which visual we got. And for that, we need to go to Power BI Service. And now here is one very important note. For this development part, definitely use Chrome. On Internet Explorer, you might run into problems and some things might not work because it's such an old browser, which lacks a lot of important features. So if you still have to use Internet Explorer in your organization, at least use Chrome here to follow along. Or Firefox, but not Internet Explorer. Because with that, you might be facing problems, you might not see your visual correctly, it might simply not work. With that, you should log into your Power BI Service dashboard here. And now we need a workspace. And for that, we should publish some data, some dashboard from our Power BI desktop tool to Power BI Service. For that, attached you'll find a zip file, data.zip, which you can extract, which then gives you the data.csv file. That's just some basic dummy data which we're going to use here so that we have some data we can push to Power BI Service and we can work with. So in Power BI Desktop, let's import that data by clicking on Get Data. And now we have a text CSV file, so let's choose that. And choose that data.csv file we got here. Click Open. And here in the query editor, this should all be fine. We can simply click Load here to load it into Power BI Desktop. Now, once we got the data here, of course we could work with it as you learned it throughout the course, but this is just some dummy data to preview it in Power BI Service or to help us work with our custom visual. So therefore, I'll go right away to publishing it. We can, of course, quickly have a look at it if I create a table here. This is the data we got in there in the end, regions and sales. So let's publish that. And for that, save my changes, of course. And I'm going to use my default, my workspace here. We could create a new workspace. And once that is finished, we can head back to Power BI Service. And here we now got our custom visual data published. Now in here, we see our workspace. We see the data we just published. Now let's make sure we go to edit mode here. And I'm going to remove this one visualization I got here. I'll also change view here to actual size. And now make sure that you go to settings, settings again, and save the changes, of course. And here under settings, go to general developer and make sure that this box is checked, that you can debug custom visuals. This needs to be checked and apply it thereafter. Now, with that applied, if you go back to editing your project here, you actually will have this item here under visualizations. You might see an icon here. You normally should. I'm not seeing it here. Should be a bug. But here, if I hover over it, you see that's the developer visual. That's basically the preview mode here in Power BI Service. Now, if I add this visual, you should see update count 0 here. And that only works if this server here is still running. So make sure this PBI Viz start process is still running. If you quit that, this won't work. But this is now Power BI Service communicating with this process here to bring that visual we created with the PBI Viz new command onto this screen. And that's simply the starting visual, the starting output we have in this project we created. We're going to change that output throughout this module, but that's the starting setup. Now this number here will change whenever you, for example, add and remove data. You see then the counter goes up. And we will also see how we can render something totally different throughout this module. But this is now our visual. When we later make changes, we can also click on refresh here or reload to reflect our changes. But at the moment, since we didn't change anything in our visual code, of course, this just resets it. So this is how we're going to preview and how we're going to test our custom visual here inside of Power BI Service. And now with that, let's make sure that we open our visual here in Visual Studio Code, which we can do with File, Open Folder, and then simply select that bar chart folder, and that will open this project here if it isn't open already. And in here, we will then later edit our code, which is responsible for drawing this onto the screen. We can already make one tiny change so that we see the relation between our project here and our preview here. If we go to the source folder and there visual.ts, and we scroll down here to this constructor thing, you see update count. And if you change this here to my update count and save this file, and you still have this process running, that's important. Whenever you save your code, this will then repackage your demo visual for testing and push it to Power BI service. So if you saved it and this process is running, in Power BI service, if you now reload here, you see my update count. So this is how these things work together. And with that, let's now explore this entire project setup in greater detail so that we then can also start write our own code.